how did we go from, dubstep being growls and wobbles to it predominantly being drum and bass?
Oh, we're going into like sound design?
Yeah, what happened, dude? I want my Skrillex growls back.
Don't be an old man, bro. Like, I hate the way this new stuff sounds, man. No, I
actually love the Virtual Riot's take on it because he's kept a lot of his sounds in there. He's just done a drum and bass like that. What was that last album that he dropped that you put me on?
Stealing Fire.
Yeah, That was actually fantastic. Pretty cool.
Well, he said it's an homage to Skrillex's A Quest for Fire from 2022.
Which is pure drum and bass.
Well, there's a lot of mid-tempo in there. You're talking about the meta of sound design, which is hilarious because like we were talking about this before, like the types of synthesizers that have actually influenced a lot of the artists that we listen to today. Like when we were in high school, like between 20, like the I'll talk about the U.S. takeover of dubstep, like when dubstep really landed in the U.S. between like 2009 and 2011. There was a lot of artists that were coming out using Native Instruments synth called Massive. And Massive was like the go-to. It had the Skrillex sound. It had the Knife Party sound. It had like all the drum and bass sounds that you would associate with, all of the bro step sounds that you would associate with. Like that's where those came from.
Is Massive a plugin that will go into any, like it will work in Ableton, it'll work in... That's cool. I did not know that they would cross.
It's a standard function or a standard file type called a VST or a virtual sound. Kill me. It's any virtual synthesizer will be in a VST format, and so you will be able to take that to any digital audio workstation. And so Massive was like the de facto, the go-to, the industry standard for.
And that's where we got Bangarang album. We got.
I would think so, yeah. And to the point where there's actually an oscillator inside of Massive called Modern Talking, and very famously, Modern Talking was used on all the growl. I don't know if it was famously used, but it's famously used for a lot of dubstep growls at the time. To the point where it became so overused that Knife Party dropped an album called 100% No Modern Talking. It was a banger album, by the way.
Funny.
Because it was so overused, people were like, oh, I hate hearing that yow, yow, why, yow type bass. Yeah. Like you could hear it in your head.
And I'm like, bring it back, dude.
Well, it's coming back.
Everybody go back to Massive.
It's coming back. Well, it's progressed, so the next big synth that really like colored our music, maybe like through the 2000 and I want to call it like 2012 to 2016 era, maybe beyond that, still maybe like 2018, 2020, was Serum, which was developed by a friend of Deadmau5. It was a terrible way to refer to him, Steve Duda, who's a genius music producer and music technologist, I would consider him, who created this program of another VST called Serum. And Serum was kind of like this like de facto like inheritor of all of these producers that were making bass music. They switched to Serum. I don't want to speak for everyone, but Serum became like the new meta for bass music production. And very recently, the meta is changing a little bit again, away from Serum, still a great synth, super powerful, to a synth called Phase Plant. Shout out Kilohertz, because that shit is amazing. Probably one of the coolest synths ever made. It's like a virtual modular synth. It's got like tons of different engines inside of it, resynthesis, granular synthesis. You can have a seemingly unlimited number of oscillators, an unlimited number of modulators, an seemingly unlimited number of effects and lanes. Like you name it, this synth can do it. And it is by far and away the coolest thing I've ever worked with. And that is coloring the sound of a lot of modern, like up to 2024, a lot of modern electronic music is using still Massive, Serum, Phase Plant.
Are VSTs monetizable by their owners?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure Native Instruments is raking it in. They have a lot of instruments out there. They created a predecessor to Massive called Massive X, and it kind of didn't carry the same weight to it with artists, but it still was, I'm sure, it's still fairly good. But there are lots of VST companies out there. Waves Audio comes to mind. Kilohertz that makes Phase Plant. There's a lot of those guys out there because music technology is a huge market, and like sample companies like Splice. Splice is a huge sample database that also includes presets. You can also rent to own because some of these softwares are not cheap. So you can rent to own some of these softwares. So it's kind of like an always evolving meta of like what is producing like the coolest sound and sound design and modern audiences' ears. So funny that you mentioned this is a very common topic in modern production. Music production is like, oh, go back to the old Skrillex, go back to and music is such a temporal medium because you could never be the Xavier you were in 2016, hearing whatever it was for the first time.
Right.
And that artist will never be that artist that they were sitting between those blown out speakers making something that no one's ever heard before, so it's really interesting because this is a common topic, like go back to the old but we'll never be the same person listening. So even if that artist decided like, you know what, I am going to go back, I'm going to revisit that album, maybe I'll even make like some remixes or whatever, it still won't ever hit you the same way because it's a temporal medium. It's things are different now than they were back then.
It was awesome because the first time we were hearing it was a brand new experience.
And to chase that idea is fairly dangerous for an artist because I think being an artist these days is being someone that you trust and an audience that can trust that the music that this person is going to put out is both an extension of themselves and the next step, the progression of themselves. And you're battling kind of this competition. Saying, I was playing some of my music next to some of the other music you like, and some of the tracks are not competitive in the way that they sound because the sounds sound a little outdated or the mix down's a little bit different and it's not tuned for modern sound systems or whatever. And so there's lots of mixing and mastering being done to be competitive in today's soundscape to make your song stand out. You might hear that the term thrown around, loudness war. The loudness war. How loud can you make a track, right? And so all of these little things have a pressure on an artist who's especially an artist producer for sound selection to determine what sounds they're going to use and the way that they're going to arrange them or compose them. Has a lot to do with your influences and other artists in the scene. So it's funny that you mentioned that because we are coming back around, at least from my anecdotal experience, we're coming back around on some of that early US bass sound. A lot of FM synthesis, a lot of bass growls, but we're not seeing it in that tempo space anymore. 140 is kind of a little slow for today's like live events. So you're seeing things like UKG, which is UK garage or garage as they want to call it. So you're actually hearing a little bit slowed down, but a double timed hat kick and snare pattern for UKG, and that's sitting typically between like 128 and 136 BPM. And then you have mid-tempo tracks, a lot like Virtual Riot or Skrillex in a mid-tempo environment, somewhere between 150 BPM and maybe 155, where you get that really bouncy, swingy pace that sounds good with halftime drums, like dubstep drums, but also sounds good with like four on the floor style, like house and electronica drums. So that those two BPMs seem to be a little bit more popular, and those were super popular. Like one straight 140 kick and snare on the 2 and 4. That is a little bit on its way out. So you're seeing kind of the old sound design come back, but in a much I tend to think a much cleaner sounding UK garage type genre, or in a much more flexible mid-tempo style.
You got me
range.
optimistic for the future.
Oh, I mean,
I'm pumped.
Dude, dubstep is like, I don't think a lot of people realize like dubstep is actually like a outcome of a sound design war. You used to see this in metal bands back in the day, like who can be harder, who can have the faster, deeper, lower bass, faster, more distorted guitar. And so you saw that in metal bands a lot. It was like, who could be fucking harder, right? And so with dubstep, it's like the same thing, and bass music particularly, not just dubstep. You have this like sound design war going on with dudes who are and gals who can be like, oh, I can go harder than that. I can go harder than that. I can make my bass louder. I can make my bass more distorted. I can make my wubs. I can bring the entire house down. Like, how loud can we get it? How insane can we go? And I think that's one of the coolest things and that people don't realize about modern dubstep or modern electronic music is like how technical things have gotten and how it's become a war with sound design and the physical limits that we can push.